started. Good morning, and thank you to everyone on the line for taking time to participate in this webinar. This is the 7th presentation in our 2016 Educational Web Series on BMC Control-M. It is the 4th in our Expert Track. For those of you who are new to our BMC Control-M webinar series, we are featuring 2 tracks this year, Introductory and Expert, so our participants can follow along with the topic that best suits their level of expertise. Thank you again to everyone who has been joining us for each of these webinars. We, as always, appreciate your participation. Before we jump into the agenda, we'll have just a few usual housekeeping items. At this time, all lines are muted. We'll have some time at the end for Q&A using the question and chat features that you see on your webinar control panel. Should you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to do so using these same features, and we'll do our best to respond as they come in. We are recording this presentation so that it can be available for future viewing. Note that each of our webinar recordings is emailed to call participants a day or so following each presentation, and they are also posted on our website where we list all of our webinars, past and future, under events. Taking a look at the agenda, today we will go over some introductions and give you a little bit of background information about Cetan Corp. Then we will cover some of our familiar workload automation challenges and also review some key stakeholders. This portion of the webinar will be familiar to those of you who have participated with us before. Then we will move into today's subject, which is workload automation reporting and that tool. Then we'll also go over some of what lies ahead for the facility with the future enhancements. Then we will have a live demonstration of the current reporting facility. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we will have some time for some Q&A. Our first presenter today is Tony Morelli, our VP of Solutions Delivery here at Cetan Corp. Tony joined the team in 2011 and contributes nearly 3 decades of IT industry expertise. In his career, he's held various technical and leadership roles at companies such as BMC Software, where he established the commercial services division of the workload automation professional services business unit. You will also hear from team member Louis Furry, a 3-decade veteran of the IT industry. He was first introduced to BMC Control-M while leading the operations team for a large global retailer, where he helped lead the transformation of the organization's job scheduling and output management tool sets to the BMC Control-M family of products. Louis subsequently joined BMC Software and was a key member of the professional services team that consolidated a variety of system automation tools to BMC Control-M and Control-O for the Defense Information System Agency across its 16 mega centers. Louis joined Cetan Corp over 5 years ago, and as a highly respected and recognized senior workload automation consultant, has supported dozens of large conversion, upgrade, and training projects for clients across every industry segment and across numerous public sector agencies. Again, my name is Kristen Malcolm. I am the Director of Marketing here at Cetan Corp. My background includes leading marketing strategy, planning, and execution for growing and innovative technology brands. I've been a member of the Cetan Corp team for just shy of 2 years, and it has been a pleasure working with and getting to know our customers during that time. Taking a look at this slide, Cetan Corp was founded in 2007 and is a Native American veteran-owned business headquartered in Chesapeake, Virginia. We also have a federal office in Northern Virginia, and in addition to these office locations, we have team members located throughout North America. Cetan Corp is a BMC Elite Solution Partner and leading workload automation partner. As I mentioned at the opening, we have been engaged in this educational webinar series for almost a year now. During this year, we're doing something a little bit different than we've done in the past by offering 2 separate tracks. The introductory track, for those of you who might want to know more about just general workload automation trends and fundamental details around Control-M and what makes it the leading solution. So when you look at this track, you can see a logical progression based on the level of familiarity with the solution, starting with our presentation a few weeks ago that provided a basic introduction, why do you need the solution, and moving forward to discussion around implementing the tool and utilizing some of its features. Then we have our expert track, which today's webinar is a part of. This track is more geared towards organizations already familiar with or using Control-M and want to explore more of the advanced features that the solution offers, or simply looking for a refresher on a particular topic. Please feel free to check out our full list of upcoming webinars. That can be found on our website at cetancorp.com/events. We're always looking for new topics and additional content that we can add to our schedule. So if you do have a certain topic of interest to you that you'd like to see presented, please feel free to reach out to us with that topic, and we will work to add it into the rotation. One additional resource I want to mention briefly is our public training. This is new this year. It is something new that for companies with maybe 1 or 2 individuals in need of training and would like to study among peers away from some of the typical distractions that you may encounter in the office. This is an alternative to our active on-site training program that we offer for training entire teams. This training does follow a role-based curriculum with our first course, Workload Automation Solution Essentials, Basic Scheduling and Operations, then moves to our Advanced and Solution Administration courses. All the courses will repeat again throughout the year. This training is delivered by our senior consultants who do this type of training every day of the year, and they provide a very hands-on, real-world experience for students. If you have any interest, please visit our website at cetancorp.com/events. I also just want to mention quickly an event we have coming up in Chicago for those of you who might be in the area on August 3rd. We are co-hosting a Workload Automation Innovation Day and networking event at Wrigley Rooftops. We'll start the day with some informative content and discussions around BMC Control-M before we take in the ball game from the rooftop. If you'll be in the area and are interested in attending, simply send me a quick email and I'll forward you additional details and registration information. The following week, we will be in Houston and Denver hosting 2 additional Workload Automation Innovation Days and networking at Topgolf. So again, if you are in or plan to be in any of these areas and are interested in attending, please reach out to me and I'll make sure you have the information you need to get registered. And now I will turn it over to Tony, who will move into today's topic.
Great. Thanks a lot, Kristen, and thank you all for joining. It looks like we've got quite a few folks on the line today, so we're going to get right into this. I'm going to go through a couple of things just to kind of introduce workload, automation, reporting, stakeholders, some of the attributes around the control and reporting facility, and then I'm going to turn it over to Louis Furry, who is going to take us through a kind of a deep dive live demonstration. So as we go through this, Kristen mentioned that the lines were muted, that we'd open them up later for questions, but there's also a question window in the GoToWebinar control panel. So if you have any questions and you want to type them in as we're going, feel free to do that as well, and then we'll take a look at those as we progress on. This is an expert series topic, but one thing I wanted to do is just kind of step back through the common challenges that most organizations face around the management of batch workloads. And you can see, the common challenges, kind of fall into different categories, but they're all kind of aligned by workload volumes, the complexity of the environment, having multiple technologies that you use to manage your batch workloads. And those are all the common things, hey, I'm running, 100,000 jobs a day on a mainframe, Unix, Linux, and Windows, and we also have, J.D. Edwards integration needs, SAP integration needs, and some emerging big projects that we're trying to support. Some of the other challenges, though, are more business-centric or more compliance-based in nature, and the business-centric ones are reporting and auditing are what we're going to focus on today. And the reason for that is that it was one of those things that, I won't say it was a forgotten challenge, but it was one of those things that, depending on the industry that we've been working with in the past, the customer client industry, there are widely divergent reporting requirements. Some of them are organizational, for instance, informing the business. I want to be able to produce a daily report that shows us how many jobs failed last night, and if we get a 0.2% defect rate on the same job over and over again, it gets kicked up to a QA team and they remediate it. And some are imposed on governmental agencies or on different industry standards and practices. Being able to produce reports that go up to the SEC, for instance, or being able to prove that you delivered certain financial files to our friends at the Federal Reserve or the IRS. And all of those things have one thing in common, and that is that either they're produced by batch workload or the processes that produce them have some type of a connection to the batch environment. So it means that having a solid, sound reporting infrastructure is extremely important. And it also means that if you don't have that, you could be in a position where the inability to gain optics into whatever it is you're looking for, or the inability to efficiently collect the information to inform a stakeholder or a regulatory organization, can be something that puts a drain on your company. We actually have some use cases where some of our clients in the insurance industry told us that, being able to produce and satisfy the audit reporting requirements, just to show what types of things changed in the environment and how those changes were applied and who did them and when they did them, was something that was adding upwards of 20% of a full-time equivalent in terms of staffing requirements to their operations teams. And think about that. That's a crazy number with everything else we have to manage and deal with today. To think that you're looking at just the need to put almost a full-time person's equivalent, every fourth or fifth month into the mix just to produce reporting can be significant. It also means if you're not doing it well, then you're not being efficient, you're not serving the needs of the business. And as we've known and we've discussed time and time again on some of our introductory series calls, puts you in a very bad situation in terms of being able to be agile and being able to support the needs of the organization. We've seen it from a competitive perspective. Companies that do this well can be more efficient, retain more revenue on their bottom line, and therefore get ahead of their competition by being able to reinvest that into things that are more strategic to the business. So you certainly can't overstate the importance of good reporting, both from your external regulatory agencies and the internal business, to inform them on when things are running and if there are defects, what those were, or statistical and trend reports around the attainment of service levels. If you think about it, I just kind of went through quite a few stakeholders, but if you think about a typical organization inside of the business, the stakeholders that may be in need of operational or workload automation related data, it's a fairly diverse group. Everybody from the typical teams like the folks in production control who want a daily report to show any jobs that have been staged that don't have immediate predecessors defined, or where there are defects in the forecast. The operations team from a monitoring perspective, the management resources within the data center, and then out on the application side, application developers who might just want to know, hey, how many jobs do we have that run against a particular server or that use a particular application? Same thing with the QA and testing teams when you get into those defect rates I talked about earlier. And then obviously the audit, corporate compliance teams, and you think about those groups, and I'll talk about them in a little more detail in an upcoming slide, but if you think about those groups, they know nothing about the technology for the most part. They just want to check process and procedural compliance and also be able to map requests to the changes that were actually made to be able to check off on their box that things are being done properly. And then the end users, the line of business end users out there who might want a daily report that shows them that we met our time objectives for their workload, or that their service levels were met, or if there's a downward trend in headroom on those service levels, what is it? And that's all within the organization. You start to look outward, and like I said, depending on what type of industry you're in, whether it be banking, insurance, healthcare, which usually are the three biggies that generate a lot of external reporting around compliance or governance, you have a lot of additional oversight and things that you might need to produce, either to give to those oversight agencies, or at the very least to be able to retain for your own purposes in the event that there's an external audit or there's some type of an action or activity. Insurance, from a property and casualty perspective, is also something that's extremely data-driven, and having reports that can be used for discovery and litigation purposes around things that might have run and when they might have run is also extremely important. So you think about all those different stakeholders and all the different things they might be asking for, and the demands can become quite significant. Everything from the basic operational topics of, how many of my finance jobs were late yesterday, how many things blew up last night that required some type of manual intervention. And then, more from an administrative perspective, who took that server definition out of Control M and when did they do it? And then again, compliance, did the reports go out on time? If so, then when did they get there? Or how many jobs of a particular type, in this case file transfers, are defined to our application? Those are all things that, if you think about it, typical type questions, and all things that for the most part either require somebody to go in and do some ad hoc reporting or manual reporting, or to be able to leverage a sound, capable reporting engine. And that's what we're going to focus on today as far as the reporting facility with Control M. And you also have to think about, too, what happens if you get a lot of these demands. Some might be fixed. Every day I want a report that shows me X, Y, and Z. Some might be more seasonal in nature that correspond with quarter closing or audit periods. But the other thing, too, is you have to recognize that it's important to be responsive to the business. And, if not, we know that the business will call us out on not being as receptive or responsive to their needs. So you think about all of those demands, and then you throw in the level of detail that people want from an auditing perspective. It can create quite a bit of extra work for an organization. And zeroing in on corporate auditing, external auditing, as well as just different types of compliance-y type reporting. Think about the granularity of stuff that people typically want to understand. Show me when something changed, what was it that changed, who did it. If there's a way to expose a particular value to show what it was before and after the change, we'd want to know that. And if there were things that were done on the workload during the course of the night, who let that job go at 5 p.m. or when was that particular user added? Those are all things that are retained within Control M. In some cases, you've got to turn on different audit settings to capture that, but retaining it is only part of the ball game. The other part is being able to pull it out in an efficient and readily accessible fashion and put it into a format that's consumable for the end users as well. Consumable meaning that you give it to them in a format that either they can take and pass on and readily understand, or in a format that allows them to do some additional data mining or number crunching, like in a CSV format as well. Again, when we talk to a lot of our clients, especially when we're doing our SureFlight solution design activity, these are some of the things we drill into, and more often than not, you find out that depending on who you talk to, you get widely divergent answers on what level of audit type data is needed and what type of reporting. And the good news is, once you understand that, Control M gives us a platform through the reporting facility to set all those things up and even schedule them as Control M reporting jobs. And Lewis will go through what a Control M report definition job is. But once those requirements are there, they can be built, the report can be defined, a report job can be set up, and those types of things can then be automatically delivered to those end users in whatever format best suits their needs, so that from that point forward, the requirement to be hands-on in the generation of these things on an on-request basis goes away, and now they can be delivered automatically and proactively. So let's touch on the reporting facility very quickly, and then we'll jump into the demo piece. The Control M reporting facility has actually been around for quite a few releases now, and it continues to be enhanced. There's actually a fairly significant refresh that's on the roadmap, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. But even in its current format, it is a very robust solution. It's always a challenge to meet everybody's needs and desires, but if you look at the current reporting facility, not only does it maintain its own repository so that you can store previously generated reports for historical purposes, but it also gives you the facility to tap into canned reports as well as create your own reporting types. And if you look at the data, it's fairly simple, as far as the data inputs to the reporting facility. The same Control M workload folders and related elements such as resource definitions, calendar definitions, those types of things are accessible to the reporting facility. The definition files around the environment itself, so that we can do reporting around the Control M infrastructure and the distribution of workload as it runs. And then the audit logs, being able to capture those details that I mentioned on the earlier slide, and then being able to put them into some type of a report based on event, application, or line of business so that that information can be consumed. And when you look at the types of reports that you can generate out of the reporting facility, reports that give us information around the definition of all the workload, alerting and event history, when did something fail or when did a particular event occur, statistical reports around workload, show me everything that ran last night on a particular machine, or show me how many jobs failed in terms of percentage against how many jobs completed successfully, and as well as the ability to run reports that give us a forward-looking view of the current workday, basically QA reports to show me if there's anything that's been that might not have a predecessor defined, or something that's been scheduled that is, got an invalid pointer to some other event or manual requirement that needs to be resolved. And then all the other things, audit logs to be able to expose details around those events, forecasting reports that you can generate either on a localized basis, a server basis, or on a full enterprise basis, and then batch impact manager reports to show us the historical statistics around the different batch services, as well as the trends to show us if we are coming in late on a consistent basis, what are the offending jobs that are causing it, or if we're meeting all the requirements but we're losing time each day, maybe because we're seeing more transactions, being able to do a trend analysis and spot that as well. And then always the ability to use the reporting facility to create custom reports as well. So there's a variety of canned reports that come with Control-M, as you also have the ability to go through the report definition wizard and create your own, and then take that information and use it as you wish. So that's the current reporting facility that we're going to demo. Before we jump into that, I just wanted to mention that what we have coming down the pike, BMC has on the roadmap some fairly significant enhancements. So a complete refresh of the reporting facility. So it's definitely going to be modernized and look and feel just like Control-M version 9, since the GUI for the current reporting facility hasn't had a facelift in quite a while. For those users that access Control-M through self-service, you'll now have the ability from within self-service to get to the reporting facility. And to me, that's significant because it means that just like self-service gives you the opportunity to empower how you use Control-M for the end users, being able to get into the reporting facility through self-service, through your web GUI, also makes it possible then to either access canned reports or create your own custom reports to be able to pull a lot of that information out that I talked about and not have to ask somebody on an operations team or a Control-M admin team to do it for you. So it puts the end users more or less in a driver's seat in terms of being able to access data. One thing to keep in mind that all the data that you get to through the reporting facility is always based on your current Control-M level of access. So if it's data you can't see natively in Control-M, it's data that you won't be able to get to inside of the reporting facility as well. So it's one of the benefits of having a common database and all the shared elements across the different environments. And then with the new reporting facility, which will have a lot of internal performance enhancements, it's also the ability to export natively to Excel as well. Today we can export out to a multitude of formats, CSV being the one that's most common, and then you can take that and import that into an Office product or some other tool. The ability to export directly to Excel now, though, makes it much more easier to make that data that you get out of the reporting facility a little more actionable. And again, creating that from within a reporting job means that you can spit that data out exactly as somebody needs to see it. And again, what this is on the roadmap, it's on the development plan, so the release dates will be communicated officially by BMC on that. But without further ado, since we went through the upfront stuff, I want to go ahead and hand controls over to Louis Furry and let him actually take us through the reporting facility itself. So Louis, I have passed control over to you, and you should be able to show us what you have. And also, don't forget to unmute your phone.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. As Tony mentioned, just the overview of the reporting facility, just reiterate a couple things there. It does allow you to generate reports from your Enterprise Manager database. So it is key to remember that that is the database that is the input for all of these reports. There can be different types of reports with various options available within each type of report. We can generate them interactively from the reporting facility from your client, or we can set up batch jobs, and we're going to be looking at all of that. We're first going to look at some of the canned reports that are provided with any client that gets installed, and as well as demonstrating how to create your own custom reports, and then following that by creating an actual Control-M job that we can schedule this report creation automatically through Control-M. The report repository that we're talking about is on every client installation. It's kind of a long path, but they're all stored here. The canned ones that are created when the client is installed, and any custom ones that you create yourself all get stored within the same repository at on your client. If you've used the default Windows directory that's during the client installation, they're going to be located on whichever drive you installed on in the program files, BMC software, and on the directory that you see on the screen here. So it's kind of a long path. But again, this was version 9, so we have Control-M EM9 is in our path. And there's also one titled default in there. One of the directories is named default. If you have installed more than one client on your particular workstation, one might be default and one might be prod or test or something like that. So the Control-M EM9 will be dependent on your version, and the default is depending on whether there's more than one client installed. So, but after that, it'll always be the data, then reporting, and then templates directory. So when you see the contents of this directory, they're only available, obviously, for this client, the workstation that you're currently logged on to. If somebody else has created a report that might be useful for you or for other people, you can simply just copy that file that you see in here and send it to them, and or just copy it to a shared directory or something like that, somewhere that they can grab it and get it into this location on their client. And once they refresh their login to the reporting facility, they should see this in their template list as well. So if you're already in the reporting facility when you copy it in here, you'll need to log out and back in to get a refresh of that. So how do we log into the reporting facility? Well, starting in version 8 and above, behind the screens here, you're seeing a version 9 client. And I'm on the Tools domain display on the left-hand side. On the Other Tools menu, then, there is an option for reports. We can start it from there, and you can also use your Start Programs and track it down from there. If you're in version 7 or below, you can either start it from the icon on your Windows desktop or also from the Start Programs. And I believe in version 7, as of a certain fixed pack level, there was also a way to start it from within Enterprise Manager as well, too. We'll ask us to log on, provide a user and password, and once we get in there, you'll see the menu of the reports. Again, this is a view of everything that we saw in that repository. For those of you that haven't created anything yet on your own, you'll simply see a bunch of sample dash and the ones that were created by default wherever any client gets installed. Also noticing that off to the right here, there's the options for run the report, edit it, delete it, or copy it, as well as making it a favorite or seeing the last modified dates and times for that. So let's look at the sample that's at the top under the alerts, it's the sample-all unhandled alerts. If we just click the run option on that, the results of the report just gets displayed to your screen, and you can see that tabs start opening up across the bottom of this. It's a little bit different yet because it hasn't yet been brought up to the version 9 standards of having the tabs across the top of the display. But so we see this is our first report that we've created. This is simply just alerts that are unhandled. So that was just simply clicking the run option to generate the report. We see that we also have some groupings up to the side here that we can quickly just go to the very urgents and the regular ones, and this is based off of the severity of the alert that was generated. So, but when we return to the Start Page tab, let's now edit this same report definition. This allows us to see a little bit as to how what's the underlying parameters for this report and what made it generate what it did. So the first window is just showing us the report title, and you notice off to the left-hand side there's categories here. This is basically the general information. The report title, the description, and who the author was. While none of these are really mandatory to put in, it certainly is helpful to see the final result to indicate what this report actually is. Lots of times when I'm just running a report that I'm just interested in getting some data or some counts and so forth, I usually don't fill this stuff in. I just go to the next options. So continuing on to that next window is where we can specify any filtering criteria, such as time frame, and also there's the option to specify various field names and what particular information we want out of that field name. So we see that there's no time filtering being done here, but it's simply just filtering on the handled field of the alerts. When you click in the field name there where it says handled, you will see a list of all the particular parameters that are field names that can be referenced in this particular type of report. Obviously, the different types of reports will return larger or smaller lists here, but for our purposes, because we're looking at an alert, we just simply want to say if the handled field is not equal to, that's the operator, and the value of handled, that's what we want to include on this report. You'll notice also that there's a checkbox for under PARA for parameters. This is where that if you needed to specify some kind of information to this report when you wanted to run it, if you check that box, you will get a prompt when you would say run the report. It would come up and say what value do you want to use for this parameter. Helpful for things like dates and so forth, where you want to just take today's date or whatever. So that's the filtering window. Continuing on to the next window is where we can select the fields that will appear in the report. The available fields will be listed on the left-hand side, and only those that are moved to the right-hand side of the window will appear on the report. The length of each field can be modified to make them smaller or larger depending on your environment. For instance, if the Control M name is no bigger than 4 characters, we have it specified here as 15, so shortening that down to 4 frees us up another 11 characters that we could use on another field. You have 91 characters, so if you add a field that puts you over this limitation, such as if I add the host over here, you can see that it shows up in red and with a message at the bottom saying it exceeds the paper width 91 characters including spaces. So as long as you see something in red there, you're probably going to have some truncated data. So you can either remove some other fields or adjust the sizes on these if you must have the host field on this particular report. So continuing to the next window gives us the opportunity to group things. Select which columns the report rows will be grouped by. If you remember the example when I just ran this report, and we showed on the left-hand side, we showed urgent and very urgent or so forth, and we clicked on those. This was the field that's doing that, providing that information on the left-hand side for you to kind of like a table of contents or whatever to click on to go to that particular type of information. Continuing then on to the next window gives us the ability to summarize things, or the summaries options. This is, and also on the option here, whether or not to display a chart. So we see that we are utilizing a pie chart here, and we're summarizing by the severity field, along with providing a count of the values, which shows how many are in each particular severity. So in the next option then, the next window after we click next, is the sorting options. We're showing here that we're going to sort by the Control-M name in ascending sequence. Obviously, if you only have one Control-M in your environment, this really wouldn't give you anything, but the drop-down wouldn't give you much advantage to sort by the Control-M name. But you can see that you could also sort by the severity or application or any of the other fields that you've chosen for the reports. You also have two additional sorting options. So first of all, sorting by the Control-M name, and then we could also select another field and then yet another field after that. So again, ascending or descending otherwise. When we continue on to the next one, the next window, we see that these are specifying the style of the report. You have 5 options. When you click on each one, you can see the different color combinations and so forth for what's there. This particular one was just using the maple one, so kind of a cranberry color or whatever. And then finally, after selecting the style, we get a recap of everything that we specified to this point. And if we were creating a new report of this kind, we would be able to actually specify a template name for it as well. But since this is already a template, we simply just get the option to say, do you want to generate a report now? And then we can click Finish, and it would then generate the same report that we just did. So provided you haven't clicked the Finish option yet, you can say, oh, I want to go back and change a different field or whatever, you know, so or group differently and so forth. And so you can quickly go back to that. You can always use the back option to just go back one window at a time. But once we do click the Finish here, again, we get the exact same thing that we created before, because this is the exact same report. We just stepped through all the options that got us there. As Tony mentioned, you can also export these reports using the File option and then the Export option. And of course, you would choose where you would want to put it, and also give it a name and select the type of report that you want. Spreadsheets and PDF documents are probably the most common, but this is the export option there. So on the that was the running a sample report that was already there. But what do we do to create a custom report? Well, if the report you want is similar to one of the canned report templates, then you could simply just come over here and say copy that particular report template and give it a name, and then that would also show in your template list. And then from there on, you can edit that one and change it to what you want, making the appropriate changes to get what you need. But if you don't have a canned template already in existence for what you want, you can use the report definition wizard to create a new template. This is available either from the File menu and then the New option, and then we have either a new ad hoc report or a new template. And so if we were to create just a new ad hoc report, then it allows us to check the kinds that we want, or specify the kind that we want. There's also, notice that there are icons up here on the toolbar that you can click for the new ad hoc report and a new template as well. In this particular, even if you have selected the new ad hoc report option, you'll still be able to save it as a template at the end, as I mentioned earlier. So I always recommend that you always save the report as a template, simply because on your first shot through, you may not get the results that you wanted. So if you don't save it as a template, then you must go back through and re-specify everything again. So even if you think you're only going to run it once, save it as a template, and if you don't get what you want, it's a lot easier to re-specify what you want after that, as opposed to having to specifying all your field parameters and your sorting information and your grouping and all that. You'd have to do that all again if you don't keep it as a template. So let's create a new one now. We're going to create a type of Control M forecast and the execution report for the past 7 days. So once we click on forecast on the left-hand side of our new report, we can select execution and click OK. And it simply gives us this same set of options that we went through before. So we'll give it a report title, Webinar Report Executions Last 7 days. Again, we can put that same thing in the description field. I'm just going to copy and paste it here. When we go to the next window, allows us to specify the fields of the report. In my test environment, there's only one Control M server. Actually, I jumped ahead of myself there. So we have, it's already specified for the last 7 days, and we don't really need to specify any field names here, but I just wanted to demonstrate that there are many more options here. And in some of the other report types, there's even more options that has a scroll bar along the right-hand side for you to scroll through the different field names. So we want the last 7 days. We'll go on to the next field. And now that I catch up to myself here, that in my environment I only have one Control M name, so there's no real need to include that on the report. Because I would really like to also include the end time on the report. So when I move that over here, I see that that exceeded my number of columns. So by removing the Control M name, that now gets everything back here in that it's available and nothing will be truncated. Also, I want to see my end time right up after the start time. So by highlighting that and clicking the up arrow, to move it up and down in the field names so that it shows right after the start time. So when we go to the next option again, we can specify any groupings. So I'm going to group by the folder name. So I move that over to the right-hand side, and then we go on to any summaries. Let's identify how many jobs ran within the folder. So if I choose the folder name and to say count the values, that's what will tell me how many were in that particular folder that ran. So continuing on then, again, is our sorting options. Let's sort by the start time of the job. So we'll choose that in ascending sequence. And next on the style, I'm going to choose the classic for this one, which is the blue color. And then again, our next option is just a recap of this, but notice that it also gives us the option to say, save the report as a template. Once we check that, we can actually give it a name then. And I can't type and talk at the same time, so I just call it a webinar execution report. And when I click finish, the report is generated. So we see that these, for the last 7 days, these are things that ran. The folder names are grouped over here on the left-hand side, and we have the results of that. I can quickly click on a particular folder and go to that particular folder in the display. So that was generating a custom report. But now how do we're going to take that same report that we just created, and we're going to actually schedule that job within Control-M to create that report automatically. So one of the requirements of using Control-M to schedule these jobs is that they need to run on a Windows server that has a Control-M client installed on it that includes the reporting facility. You'll actually see that statement in the job definition once we get in there. We use the job type of Control-M report, which can be found on the job palette. I've got a folder here already checked out that had one report in it already. But for those of you version 8 or above, the job palette up here in the upper left-hand corner, we have a type of Control-M report. We simply drag that down here to our folder and drop it there. And we have a new definition for a Control-M reporting job. Now, you'll notice that it looks, for all intents and purposes, like any other Control-M job with the General tab, Scheduling, Prerequisites, and Actions. But on the General tab, there's one major difference, and that is this Control-M Report Attributes Details button here. So once we get into that particular report details, you'll see that the first field is the Run As User. For those of you that are maybe in version 7 or below, this is the Owner field, which is specified in here versus over on the General tab. So this is where you would specify your Run As User. And then the next 3 fields are the user and the password or the password file. This is where you would specify an actual user that can log into the Control-M client. So I'm going to use my standard user here. What a lot of customers do is they might create a standalone reporting user ID to use here, because obviously if I use my own user ID in here and I change my password, I would have to come in here to my job definition and change that password. So note also, though, the password file, I said you could use either or of those. Since I specified a username, then the password file is no longer required. Likewise, if I was to specify a password file first, then the user and password would gray out. So if you want to utilize a file on your server where this job that would run, that you could specify within that file just user equals and password equals is the option to do that. So you can specify one or the other there, but not both. The server host field is something that a lot of people get a little bit confused on. They think that's just the name of the server where this is going to run. It's actually the name of the GUI server in your environment. So I switched over to the configuration manager here, and I have the GUI server highlighted, and so my name is Cetan LR0015 is the name of my GUI server. So that is actually what I need to key in this host field. If by chance your GUI server does not have a name, you might want to consider just adding a second GUI server with an actual name to it that you can specify in here for your report job. The next field is the EM report CLI path, and that is simply the path to the EM report CLI executable. So it's under the bin32, and then there's your EM report CLI.exe. So that simply becomes this path here. And then which template do we want to use? If you are using one out of your standard repository, it's simply the name that we just gave it, webinar under execution _ report. Also, if you noticed in the repository, the report, the file names were suffixed with .em.rpt. You can specify that here or not, either one. It will pick it up with or without it. Actually, have the ability to also specify a template path. I kind of recommend this for the report that you're going to schedule. Just a real world example from a customer. We had a customer that scheduled these jobs on a server that had the Windows reporting facility, and they had created the template, and they were running a report for like the past 30 days. And all of a sudden, they started getting, people were saying this report only contained 7 days. Well, if somebody had gone on to the server where the job ran at and had actually used the reporting facility, went through the template and changed it to 7 days and ran the report, but never changed it back to 30 days when they were done. So obviously the next time the report job came around, it ran the report and only had 7 days worth of data. So for that reason, I usually say it's probably a good idea to kind of move these to a kind of a locked up area, so to speak, so that somebody doesn't accidentally go in and modify that. So you can still go in there and create, use your regular reporting facility to create your report template, and then once you have it ready, simply move it or copy it over to the template path that you're going to use, and then you will be sure that nobody will be accidentally updating it there. Following on down, then, we have the option to add a, say, do we want the output to go to a file or the output to go to the, that says out of the job. So what we're going to do here is actually put it into a file. We demonstrate creating a spreadsheet. We'll demonstrate creating a PDF file. And I'm just simply going to put it in my C drive in my temp directory, and this is where we would give it the whole path and name of this. And you can use auto-edit variables within the the name of the report here. You also have the ability off to the side here to use a couple of special values with the, I'll select the date field here and put that in there, and then we'll create it as a PDF. So the parameters here, if this was a report that had a parameter that we needed to specify to it, this is where we would define this is the value that you use for that parameter for this run. So we don't have any of those in this particular report, but again, from here on out, this is simply just like any other Control-M job, and so we'll give it an application of reports and a sub-application of demo, and I'll leave this as, give it a different job name. And again, the scheduling, the prerequisites, all of that, no different from any other job. So, this details is here is the only one that's actually different. So we're rapidly coming up on the top of the hour here, so I'm just quickly going to just order this job. And we come over here and see that it's executing. And then when we go to my temp directory, there we can see that it popped in there. And this should be a match of the one that we ran interactively from the client. So that was a quick run through of the different types of reports. Again, different samples there that you can experiment with to see what's best for your needs, and what different each different type of report, all the different parameters that you can specify to it. So at that, Tony, are you ready for me to turn it back to you?
Yeah, why don't you leave your screen up, Louis? We had a couple of questions while you were talking, and thank you for taking us through that. I just wanted to touch on those questions that came up in the question window, and we can also open up the audio as well. But just to do a real quick recap, there were a couple of questions. There were two I answered, so anybody that didn't see that in the question window, if you open that window, you'll see. But just real quick recap on the questions that we already responded to, then we can address the other two. One was just around being able to specifically find the detailed documentation around all the parameters available to filter on. And the response was that, you know, there is a standard Control-M reporting facility user's guide that you can get from the BMC support site that lists all the things that Louis kind of went through in the demo. But within the reporting facility, you probably saw after we responded to the question that as you're building a report, it automatically prompts you with all of the available fields, and then that way you don't have to figure out what they are. But you can also go into another resource. It's the Control-M parameters guide that actually lists what all those particular fields are, and what, you know, what their specific details are. But usually, just once you go to the reporting facility, you'll see all the ones that are dropped down and so forth. Other question was on being able to access report content from an external dashboard. And with the current version, the best answer is that using a reporting job, just like Louis had, it's better to produce the content and let a report job push it out to a file share, you know, like SharePoint, or drop it into a folder somewhere that you're already linking to, versus trying to, you know, get the reporting facility repository. With Control-M, with the enhancements on the reporting facility that we talked about earlier, though, there is actually the ability to get to that content through self-service, as well as the ability, a little more open, it's a common repository, which means that common repository can be attached to externally as well. So there's a recap on the first two questions. The ones that I didn't answer in the window that I wanted to go through was, oh, I'm sorry, there's a third question as well, and that was a way to have a report span multiple columns when we get into the fact that we've overrun the physical size of the page. And the response was, you know, when you're looking at a report online, it can be as wide as it needs to be, and there's no limitation. The prompt, if you will, basically it's just there to tell you that you've exceeded the physical size of the paper. So in case you intend on actually printing that report, you know, that prompt that says you've exceeded the size of the printed page, you can basically disregard it. One question though that was follow up on that though is, you know, and Lewis, maybe you could show us real quick, is there a way in the reporting facility to dictate and define what the size of the page is? So when we're setting up a template, can we say, hey, it's 133 characters or it's 80 characters, and then you know, have that warning be based off of that definition?
You know, to my knowledge, that doesn't exist yet.
Okay, so that'll be locked.
So
I know in the version it will be.
Yeah.
So. Okay, so to recap on that one, the answer is that in the current version, you know, there's an assumption that the physical page is going to be, you know, basically 8.5 by 11, and you know, if you print it, that's what you get. If you want to, you know, use a different style or structure, then you can always, again, disregard those warnings and print. You know, if you make it a PDF report, for instance, you can then set whatever orientation and size you want to. One other question was just around the need to co-locate an agent and the client on the same Windows machine in order to actually run the Control M reporting jobs. Is that, I know with early releases up through Control M version 8, it is a requirement. I wasn't sure, Lewis, if you had any knowledge of whether or not that's still a requirement once we get into version 9.
To my knowledge, it is. In fact, when we go back here to the job definition, which I didn't point that out when we were in report details. This is the, up in the corner here, it says run this job on a computer running Microsoft Windows that has Control M Enterprise Manager version 6401 or above with the reporting facility installed on. I have seen some people do some things with just using the EM report CLI. That we're actually, this is what it's calling behind the scenes. But the problem with that is then that you need to specify the users and passwords and all that. When we look at the actual output of the job here, we can see it doing the EM report CLI with the -U and so forth. So if you were to specify users and passwords in here, you would see that in the output of the report. So I have not tried to run that on a Unix or Linux machine with just that command line, again, because people usually don't want to see that information in there, and this using this method allows you to hide all that information.
Got it. Okay. All right, and then I guess I don't see any other questions. I didn't know if we wanted to open up the audio, Kristen, or I know we're a few minutes over. We could certainly still stay on the line as needed.
What we can do, if there is anyone who does have a question, just use the raise hand feature and I can unmute your line. I did see that we had one hand raised. I'm not certain whether or not it indicates a question. So Doug Perrine, I'm going to unmute your line. You can let us know if you have a question. And your line is now unmuted. No? No question? Okay.
All right. Well, everybody, I know we're few minutes over. If you do have some questions, feel free to follow up. Feel free to shoot us an email afterwards. We'll be happy to take any questions, or you can certainly call as well, but follow-up email would be great, and we'll distribute those questions and answers to the rest of the attendees on the session today. And just as we wrap up, just a reminder, we've got several more sessions coming up. The next one will be the Control M for advanced file transfer, and then we'll get into some of the other features, including the new managed file transfer tool after a nice lengthy break sometime in September. And then also, speaking of September, BMC Engage is coming up. It's going to be in Las Vegas. Cetan Corp is once again a sponsor, so we will be there. We'll also have our experts there to be able to answer any questions or spend time with you. So we'd love to see you if you plan on being there. And with that, I think we are at the end. So once again, everybody, thank you very much for joining. Feel free to shoot us any questions as follow-up. And everybody, please have a great rest of the week, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you.